He raised his glass, looked me dead in the eye, and said it in front of everyone. Worthless trash. I was standing there holding a gift I'd spent weeks working on, surrounded by people I'd helped, supported, and showed up for. And they laughed. In that moment, I realized I wasn't part of their family. I was a prop in their show, but I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just smiled and walked away. That was the last time anyone in that house underestimated me. Welcome back to Revenge with James, where silence isn't weakness and betrayal never goes unanswered. If you're new here, I'm glad you found this corner of truth and fire. If you've been riding with us, you know how we do it here. Calm voices, cold facts, and the kind of revenge that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Today's story, it's about dignity, legacy, and what happens when the man they dismissed takes back everything they took for granted. Before everything changed, I lived a quiet life. Not glamorous, not loud, just steady. I woke up before sunrise most days, not because I had to, but because I liked the silence. There's something sacred about that moment when the world hasn't woken up yet. The old coffee pot hissed and clicked like it had a soul of its own. I'd sit on the porch in the dark, wrap my hands around a chipped mug, and listen to the stillness. Same street since 2006. Same neighbors walking their dogs, same mailman who nodded but never spoke. And I liked that rhythm. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I worked with my hands, residential maintenance, you name it. I fixed it. Leaky roofs, busted pipes, electric panels that sparked when they shouldn't. I didn't wear suits. I wore purpose. I came home with grit under my fingernails and tired knees. But I came home proud, and every time I crossed that front door, I thought, this is the house I helped build. A father who called his lawn a legacy and his company the family crown. I remember the first time I visited her family's estate. Big glass doors, marble countertops, wine racks taller than I was. I brought a pie her mother never unwrapped. Her father looked at me like I'd just dragged dirt onto his rug. But she said she loved me, said she didn't care about all that, said I was solid, dependable. And so I believed her. I believed that love would earn respect over time, not for lack of trying. There were mornings when she cried in the shower and came out pretending she hadn't. I never pushed. I just held her and said, we've still got each other. That became my promise and my prison. I did the dishes without being asked. I never forgot birthdays. I never left without a kiss. That's who I was. Not a hero, just a man who tried. Her name's Claire, and when we met, she had this way of making you feel seen. Really, we crossed paths at a volunteer event for veterans. She was pouring coffee and laughing with an older man, who called her Sunshine. I was fixing a busted heater no one else knew how to touch. She offered me a refill and said, I like men who fix. I didn't know then that I'd spend the next 10 years trying to fix everything for her, including the cracks she never admitted she had. Because Claire was elegant, not just in how she dressed, in how she spoke, how she carried herself. She came from old money. One of those families that acts like a bank account, is a bloodline. And for a while, she protected me from that. Then there was him, Gerald, her father. The first time I met him, he shook my hand like it was a formality, looked me up and down like he was measuring what I wasn't. He asked what I did. I told him I worked in maintenance, home systems, electrical, HVAC. Her mother, Helen, she was quieter, cold in a polite way, always setting extra places at the table, but never asking you to sit. She'd offer tea without sugar, then whisper later that Claire was slipping beneath her station. I tried to win her over, fixed their leaky skylight, painted their porch by hand. She sent a thank you card, signed it with her full name, like I was a contractor. Claire had a brother, Stephen, finance guy, smiled too much, drank too fast, and always managed to turn every family dinner into a subtle competition. He once asked me if I was still doing the manual labor thing. I nodded and said, yep, still paying your sister's car note with it. He didn't laugh. Then there was my coworker, Daniel. He was the kind of friend who showed up to help patch your roof before you asked. One night after work he looked at me and said, you ever feel like you're married into a club you'll never have a key to? I said no. But that question stuck to my ribs. And Claire started changing. Her hands colder when she held mine. Her silence longer when her father made jokes at my expense. She once said, they just don't understand you. Her father gave a toast and thanked everyone who's truly part of this family. He didn't look at me once. Claire squeezed my hand under the table, but didn't say a word. I was just near it. Respect. That's what it always came down to. Not applause, not recognition, just the quiet knowing that who I was, How I lived mattered to the people I gave my life to. But I had a father whose hands were leathered by work and a voice that never raised, unless it was to protect someone. He used to say, "A man doesn't need to be rich, he needs to be counted on." I built my life around that. I thought Claire saw that in me. Thought that love, real love, wasn't about matching paychecks, but matching effort. I never wanted to be flashy. I wanted to be reliable. The man who showed up, stayed late, paid early. The man who kept his promises, even when no one else was watching. What mattered most to me? Her respect. Not just her love, her regard. I didn't need roses and praise. I just needed to know she looked at me across the table and thought, "That's my husband, and I'm proud of him." And when I married into her family, I believed that eventually, they'd see it too. I thought if I kept showing up, fixing things, helping out, staying quiet when I wanted to speak, I'd earn it, their trust, their respect, maybe even their acceptance. I wasn't chasing status. I was building something bigger than money. A name that meant something. Say one day, I believed her. Respect. That's what it always came down to. Not applause, not recognition, just the quiet knowing that who I was, how I lived mattered to the people I gave my life to. But I had a father whose hands were leathered by work and a voice that never raised unless it was to protect someone. He used to say, "A man doesn't need to be rich, he needs to be counted on." Thought that love, real love, wasn't about matching paychecks, but matching effort. I never wanted to be flashy. I wanted to be reliable. The man who showed up, stayed late, paid early. The man who kept his promises, even when no one else was watching. What mattered most to me? Her respect. Not just her love, her regard. I didn't need roses and praise. I just needed to know she looked at me across the table and thought, "That's my husband, and I'm proud of him." And when I married into her family, I believed that eventually, they'd see it too. I thought if I kept showing up, fixing things, helping out, staying quiet when I wanted to speak, I'd earn it, their trust, their respect, maybe even their acceptance. I wasn't chasing status. I was building something bigger than money. A name that meant something. Say one day, I believed her. That dream, of peace, of finally arriving at something I built with my own hands, and my own heart, that's what I held close. And that's what made their laughter that night feel like acid poured on everything I carried quietly for years. It wasn't just about a cruel comment. It was about how easy it was for them to tear down what I spent a lifetime building. I wasn't chasing wealth. I was chasing dignity. The kind of life where I could sleep at night knowing I never cut corners, never passed the blame, never broke what I could fix. That meant more to me than any title. My wife's respect. Not just her affection, her regard. I wanted to be the man she looked at across a crowded room and felt proud to walk toward. Not because of money, but because of how I stood, how I stayed. I'd print out bank statements, show her what I'd saved toward our future. Maybe a small cabin in the hills, a little porch, a place where we could grow old without a schedule. She'd nod, say, "That sounds nice." And I believed she meant. My father taught me, leave the world with your name clean, and your hands calloused. That's the code I lived by. And every sacrifice I made, missed holidays, side jobs on weekends, saving when others were spending, was so that one day she'd know she married a man who could be counted on. So she'd never have to wonder where I was. So she'd never have to carry weight I could shoulder instead. That's who I was, before it all changed. They say betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It starts in whispers, not declaration. And when you love someone, you tell yourself 1,000 quiet lies to avoid hearing the one loud truth. I told myself it was work, said nothing. There was a weekend she said she needed space. Drove up to her sister's cabin alone. I packed her bag, kissed her goodbye, but when she came back the laundry smelled like a detergent we didn't use. I asked if she bought something new. She said I was imagining things. The money started shifting too. Not big chunks, just little withdrawals I didn't remember making. She said they were for birthday gifts. A niece, a work friend. I smiled, let it go, even when the numbers didn't add up. She started coming to bed later, said she had emails to catch up on. I stayed awake some nights, listening to the soft clicks of the keyboard. But I never asked, because asking meant inviting a truth I wasn't ready to meet. One morning I poured her coffee like I always did. She didn't say thank you, didn't even look up, just scrolled through her phone and said, "You always make it too strong." That cut deeper than it should have. She started saying I'm more than we. Small thing. I can't going to that wedding next month. Not, we were invited. I caught the shift. I just chose not to name it. Because when you've built your life on showing up, the last thing you want to admit is that maybe no one's waiting for you anymore. It's strange, The way your memory works when something starts to break. You don't remember the arguments first. You remember the warmth. The reason you stay. Rented a tiny one-bedroom with a stove that clicked for 20 seconds before lighting. I remember coming home one night, dead tired. She'd lit candles. Not for romance but because the power had gone out. We played cards under a blanket. She beat me every hand. Said you're bad at cards but you're good at showing up. That meant something to me back then. That felt like love. I remember when we tried for a baby, month after month. That quiet heartbreak in her eyes. One night she cried on the bathroom floor. Said she felt like her body had failed. I held her for hours and said, "You're not broken. We're just walking a longer road." I meant that. Every word. I kept them, still have one tucked in my wallet. The inks faded but the feeling stayed. One year I saved up for months to buy her this necklace she once pointed at in a magazine. When I gave it to her she cried, held my face in her hands and whispered, "You always make me feel like I matter." So when she stopped looking at me like that, when her eyes slid past mine at dinner, when the space between us in bed felt colder than the sheets, I didn't get angry. I got confused. Because I wasn't fighting to keep love alive. I was fighting to believe it had ever left the room. It was remembering how beautiful it all once was, and knowing I was the only one who still carried those moments, like they meant something. It was her mother's 70th birthday. They rented out a country club, white linens, crystal chandeliers, food with names I couldn't pronounce. I wore my best suit, the one I only bring out for weddings and funerals. I spent 3 weeks putting together her gift, a hand-bound photo album. I tracked down old pictures, restored them, even got one framed from her first recital, and I thought, maybe this time, they'd see me. We were halfway through dinner. Her father stood up with a glass of wine in his hand, said he wanted to give a toast. The room went quiet. Then he turned to me, held up the album I had wrapped in brown paper and ribbon, looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe, and he said loud enough for the whole damn room to hear, "That's the best you could do, a scrapbook." God help my daughter. She married worthless trash. Laughter. Not just from him, from a few cousins, a brother, even a family friend I'd fixed a bathroom leak for last summer. Claire, she just froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. She didn't speak, didn't stand, didn't say enough, and I just sat there, holding a fork I suddenly had no appetite for, staring at a table of people who smiled at my expense. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was how normal it felt to them, like they'd been waiting for the moment to finally say it out loud. I looked at Claire, waiting for something, anything. She looked down at her plate, took another bite of salmon, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't married to her. I was just being tolerated by her family. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled, not a kind smile, not even a bitter one, just the kind of smile that says, "I heard you." Walked past the table, past the chandeliers, past the family I'd spent 10 years trying to win over. I sat in my truck, keys still in the ignition, hands on the steering wheel like I was about to drive somewhere. But I didn't, telling themselves I was too sensitive, that I couldn't take a joke. The streetlights were humming, and all I could hear was my heartbeat, slow, heavy, like it was trying to ask a question I didn't have the answer to. Showed up for birthdays, funerals, surgeries, house repairs, fixed things no one noticed until they were broken. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a man with value, and started becoming just convenient, until even that wasn't enough. What stung wasn't the insult. It was how easy it was for all of them to laugh after, like I hadn't carried them, like I hadn't paid to be in that room. And Claire didn't stop it, didn't defend me, didn't even come after me. So I sat there, in the truck we bought together, outside the party I wasn't really invited to, wearing the suit she said made me look respectable, and realized I wasn't part of her life anymore. And that night, it said one thing to me: it's time. And Claire didn't stop it, didn't defend me, didn't even come after me. So I sat there, in the truck we bought together, outside the party I wasn't really invited to, wearing the suit she said made me look respectable, and realized I wasn't part of her life anymore. And that night, it said one thing to me: it's time. Here's the part they'll never tell you, the quiet part, the part no one clapped for. I built half of what they brag about, and I didn't even put my name on it. Business failure, bad investments. He was too proud to tell his father, so he told me. I pulled $12,000 from my own savings to cover the mess. Told Claire it was just a short loan. Never saw a penny back. But you know what I did see? Stephen buying himself a new watch. 2 months later. Then there was Claire. I never told anyone this. Not even Daniel, my closest friend. A few years back she came home from what she called a business trip. Her eyes were red. She said she'd made a mistake, that it only happened once. I didn't ask for details.
I didn't want to know, because I thought forgiveness meant holding on tighter, even when your hands are bleeding. Backstories End 3. Family business involvement. And let's talk about her father's precious company. The one they said was built from the ground up. I installed their HVAC systems for free, fixed plumbing issues in their rental properties at cost. Hell, I even used my own connections to get them a better contractor deal when they expanded. Not once did they thank me, but they sure cashed the checks like my time was worthless. I carried their weight, quietly. Every time I wanted to speak, I bit my tongue. Every time I wanted to leave, I told myself I was overthinking. And for what? So a man who's never worked a day outside an office could call me trash in front of the same people I carried on my back. That's when it stopped being about feelings. It became about something else. Reclaiming, not revenge, not rage. Just taking back what I built, piece by piece before they could spend my soul like spare change. They say every man has a line. Mine had been crossed before. I just hadn't noticed. But this wasn't just a bruise. It was a burn I couldn't ignore. 2 days in, I needed the insurance papers for our home. They were always in the third drawer, labeled organized, but the folder was gone. At first I wasn't even looking for dirt. I just needed a file, but a notification popped up in the corner. Subject changing beneficiaries. You urgent. From her financial advisor. She had requested her share of our retirement account be redirected to someone else, not me. Like I hadn't spent 20 years turning every spare dollar into a future neither of us would have to fear. I clicked into her photos folder. I didn't have to dig. They weren't careful. A picture. My side of the bed. The pillow I replaced after she said it was hurting her neck. He was smiling. She was smiling. And something soft, loyal, that part of me that kept forgiving. It died. That was the moment. Not when she cheated. Not when she spent my money. But when she replaced me in my own home. And didn't even bother to hide it. I used to say love was about showing up. Turns out, it's also about knowing when to step back. And from that second on, I didn't want to save anything anymore.
I wanted to reclaim everything they mistook for free. When she came home, she walked through the door humming, tossed her bag on the couch, said, "That retreat was exactly what I needed." I nodded. She didn't notice I was really looking at her. For the first time in years, I waited until she went to bed. Then I sat at the kitchen table, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. It started small, a copy of the bank statement, an export of her photo folder, a printout of the email from her advisor. I didn't rage. I didn't pace the room or pound the wall. I just started collecting quietly, neatly, like I was preparing for an audit of a life I no longer believed in. Not to talk, just to schedule. I went to the bank in person, asked a few calm questions, found out more than I thought I would. At dinner, she asked if I wanted wine. I said sure, poured her a glass, watched her laugh at something on her phone. She thought my silence meant surrender. She didn't realize silence can be a weapon. I didn't warn her, didn't drop hints. I let her plan vacations. I said, sounds great. I smiled when she said, we should remodel the kitchen. Because the thing about being underestimated is it gives you the freedom to rebuild without anyone noticing. Sometimes, it shows up in a change of address form, in a revised deed, in the bounce of a card they thought still worked. I didn't stop loving quietly. I started reclaiming. Quietly, let it lapse. She called the provider. They told her the file was updated. She looked at me. I just said must have been an error. Listed my godson, the only person who ever asked how I was doing. She kept spending, kept planning getaways. Said she wanted to update the kitchen. I said go ahead, just send me the numbers. When she joked about upgrading partners during a call with her sister, I saved it. When she mentioned moving our money into her new plan, I timestamped it. All stored, all clean. They didn't see the wires pulling free. Because people who think they own you never check the foundation until it's already gone. I said, check the paperwork. Or don't. It's not my problem anymore. Not because of work, not because of worry, but because the silence in the room felt different. Not peaceful, just hollow, just shadows on opposite sides of the same wall. There were nights I looked at the folders, the copies, the proof, the paperwork, and thought maybe I should have just left. Let them keep the money. Let her keep the house. Let them toast their champagne and pretend I was the villain who just disappeared. Maybe I should have started fresh. Bought a trailer in the woods, lived off the land, let karma deal with them. Every time I said no to what I wanted because I was thinking of us. They didn't just steal money. They tried to erase the proof that I showed up. Like I was carrying all of it, their guilt, her silence, my rage, alone. And I'd say to myself, if you don't protect what you built, they'll spend it like you were never there. And most of all, with apologizing for the weight I carried in silence. It was a Sunday. Warm, Quiet. She thought I was visiting my cousin. I wasn't, but her laptop was still open on the kitchen counter. Same spot she always left it. Lid half closed. Humming with heat. I wasn't looking for anything. Not that day. As sometimes, the truth doesn't wait for permission. A video. Sent to her sister, holding a glass of wine. Smiling. And then she said it. To finally getting what I deserve. Clink. He was never going to use that money right anyway. She was talking about our retirement account. About the man who skipped vacations. Skipped new clothes. Skipped meals some weeks to build a future she laughed at over red wine. And I stood in my own kitchen, watching the woman I built a life with turn my name into a punchline. Or worse, that even if I did, I'd do nothing. And that night, she walked into a house that looked the same, but it wasn't hers anymore. Kicked off her heels. Said, "Let's order in. I don't feel like cooking." Copies of account statements. Screenshots. Emails. The title change for the house. The removed beneficiary notice. Everything in black and white. I didn't say a word, just stood across the room and watched her sit down slowly, like the floor had moved under. She flipped through page after page like she was trying to find a loophole that wasn't there. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. The next morning, the locks were changed. The joint credit card. Cancelled. The car. Repossessed. It had always been in my name. She just forgot. Handed him the same envelope, full of unkept promises, unpaid debts, and now legal detachment. She tried to argue. "I just stopped letting you spend what you never earned." She texted. She called. She even came by once. But she stood outside the door and found it no longer open for her. That was the day they realized the man they called worthless trash was the only reason they were standing on solid ground. Not at first. There was just silence. Claire sat on the floor that day, papers in her lap, eyes tracing numbers like they'd rewrite themselves if she blinked hard enough. But the math never lies. And for the first time in years, she didn't have anything clever to say. Our father didn't call. He sent an email. One sentence. "We could have handled this privately." I replied with nothing. I let it ring, then blocked the number. Sometimes, the loudest scream is the look someone gives when they realize the game's over, and they lost. Not because they were outplayed, but because they never knew you were playing. Because she wasn't texting me, she was texting the version of me who would have forgiven her. And that man? He'd been gone the moment she smiled at another man, in the bed I paid for. Her father showed up to a board meeting 1 month later, only to find his name had been removed from the lease renewal. It was my signature on the bottom. Always had been. He just never looked that closely. Because they knew I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped saving it. The one who waited for respect like it was something to be handed out. I live in a smaller house. Fewer rooms. Fewer people. But peace, it fills every corner. And no one waiting to chip away at me just because they can. Now I know it can be a kind of freedom. And love? I haven't closed the door on it. But if it ever knocks again, it'll have to take off its shoes. Speak with respect. And know whose home it's walking into. Because this time, I'm not handing over my worth for a seat at someone else's table. I built my own. And if they ever try to tell the story their way, they'll have to leave out the ending. Because they weren't there when I rebuilt from the ash. I didn't get louder. I didn't get even. I just got clear. I wore my wedding ring longer than I should have. Even after the papers were signed. Even after the locks were changed. Even after her father's face turned pale, reading the numbers in that envelope. Not because I still loved her. Not because I hoped she'd come back. But because I needed to remember. It was the weight of loyalty worn quiet. It never left a bruise, but it fit looser week by week. Almost like it knew it didn't belong anymore. Sometimes I still see the tan line. But that's fading now too. And letting it go quietly without ceremony was the loudest freedom I've ever known. I haven't seen her since the court date. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. But the best kind. It's silence. It's distance. It's watching someone finally sit with the wreckage they built with their own hands. I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. Was I wrong to protect what was mine? Not just the money, not just the house, but the years, the effort, the version of me that kept giving, even when nothing came back. Let them keep it all. Started over without the weight of revenge on my back. I was reclaiming it, piece by piece, the only way to prove I ever mattered at all. I just waited until they handed me the rope, and then I let them hang themselves with it. You didn't hear this from neighbors or friends. This story, every bruise, every receipt, every quiet move came from me, and that is more than enough. Was I wrong to protect what was mine? Not just the bank account, not the property. I'm talking about my time, my name, the years I worked while they smirked, the version of me that stayed loyal, while they laughed behind my back. Should I have let them keep it all? Should I have just walked out the front door, left the keys on the table,
and said take it, every last piece. Would that have made me noble, or just invisible? One final time, but when I swept the floor clean, they had nothing left to stand on. So no, I didn't scream, I didn't set fire to anything, I just stopped letting them spend what I built. And if that makes me cold, maybe it's because I stood in the heat too long, waiting for someone else to say I matter. Have you ever poured everything you had into someone only to watch them toast to your downfall? Because the thing about people who think they're above consequences is they never look down long enough to notice what they're standing on. And me, I was the ground beneath them, holding everything up. Until I let go, I just waited, until they handed me the rope. Tell me something, would you have fought back that night? Thrown your glass across the room, told them exactly what you were worth? Or would you have done what I did, walked out and let silence do the talking? What would you do if the people you fed with your own hands later turned and starved you? If the family you showed up for, the people you carried, protected, and believed in, turned their heads and let you be humiliated? Would you burn the whole thing down, or just take back what was yours, without ever raising your voice?